My book, When Magic Calls, a collection of modern fairy tales, has been out for about a year now. I'm super excited and I wanted to celebrate that today. So today I want to talk about celebrating your wins when it comes to your book. Today I'm going to read my favorite scene to you and share how that scene almost didn't even make it into the book at all, and how it's important to push through the hard times to make sure you do get to those favorite scenes. And then I want to talk about how important it is to celebrate your small successes in publishing. It's pretty easy to get down in this industry. And if you hang on until the end of this video, I'll tell you how to get a timeline of a book infographic that will help you plan out the writing, marketing, and publishing steps of your book. This is Ignited Ink Writing, a channel dedicated to helping authors like you transform your writing so it lingers with your readers, because writing that lingers gets remembered and recommended to others. I'm Caitlin Burvey, editor and author. Let's start with celebrating your success. In the publishing industry as authors, we hear no a lot. No, I don't like that idea. No, I don't want to represent you in your book. No, we're not the right publisher for you. It's not very fun. And then once we do publish, we get to listen to readers tell us what they don't like about our books, after we put all of that effort and time, energy, money behind it. Because we hear that no a lot, I think it's really important for us to celebrate and pay attention to the times we get told yes. So in my collection, I pitched many of these stories to literary magazines before I put them in my collection. Not all of them made it in those magazines, but the ones that did, I celebrated, because it's important to recognize what is going well for you. Also, once you publish, you're going to get reviews. I have decided not to always read the 1 or 2 star reviews, especially if it starts out with something that tells me they just were not the right reader for this book. For example, my collection is for adults. It's not for kids. So one of my reviews on Goodreads started out with, "I was reading this to my kids." Well, you should not be doing that. I say all over on my marketing material, this is a collection for adults, even though it's a twist on fairy tales. We're talking the old-fashioned dark fairy tales, not the Disney versions. So I know that no wasn't really to me. That was more of a no, I shouldn't have picked up this book, not so much a no, you did something wrong. I could have chosen to focus on that bad review and to try and figure out what went wrong there and try and write a book for that person and their kids. Or I could pay attention to the other reviews that I have, the positive ones, where they say what they did like about the book, where one of the people said that their favorite story was a story that I almost didn't put in here because I was afraid people wouldn't quite get it. So it's important to pay attention to those more than the negative reviews or no's, especially the no's that's more of it's not a good fit for me, and not so much the quality isn't great or something along those lines. If I had a review that was talking about all of the typos in my book, that's a negative review I definitely would pay attention to, and then I could go and fix those things. But I'm not going to pay so much attention to the people who say this just wasn't the book for me. That's fine. Some books aren't the book for me either. So when you are looking at your reviews or when you are pitching your stories to try and get them published, remember how important it is to celebrate those times when you are successful, or to celebrate the times when something good happens related to your book. That will help you get through the times when maybe nothing good is happening right now. So next I want to share why you should push through the hard times when writing your book. In When Magic Calls, one of the short stories is titled Borrowed Skin, Borrowed Year, and that story almost didn't get finished. I found the beginning of that story particularly difficult. It is starting at a more low point in the character's life, and that's not something I do very often in my writing. I usually start more as an everyday sort of place and not in a really low place. So in this one, I was starting really low and I was having a hard time figuring out how to keep it interesting without sounding whiny. And it was making me really frustrated. So I decided to skip forward and I wrote the next scene, or 2 scenes later, really. And that is probably one of my favorite scenes in the whole collection. I love this scene. I think it's funny. You might not, but I really enjoy this scene. I wouldn't have even written that scene if I hadn't pushed through that tough beginning. Now I'm happy with the beginning. It took me a few rewrites to get there, but I only was able to get there because I had written that scene that I was so excited about, and I didn't want to not finish the story and not get a chance to show that scene to people. So if you're having a really hard time writing, I recommend trying to write somewhere else in the book. You might skip forward a little bit. You can always come back and fill that in later. You might go back to the beginning and write something that you missed. You could even work on something else if you need to. I am the type of writer who doesn't really write in order. I usually know where I'm going. I usually know what the end result of this story is going to be. So I can skip ahead easier than people who don't know where they're going. And I'll write the scenes that I'm excited to write, and it shows that I was excited to write those scenes. If I wait too long, sometimes I'm not excited anymore by the time I get to those scenes, and it loses that little spark that comes when a reader can tell you just loved writing that scene. So don't be afraid to jump around if you need to get past those rough patches. And don't be afraid to push through. Now I want to share my favorite scene from Borrowed Skin, Borrowed Year in When Magic Calls. So this is my book, When Magic Calls. This is the story that we're going to be reading from. My mom did illustrate the book for me. I'm super excited about that. That's where the cover came from. This is the image that goes with this story. So I'm going to set the scene for just a second. The main character, Cassidy, has just rescued a man from the beach who was injured. She brought him home, helped clean him up, and now he's napping while she is picking up after a party. Also, she is currently really angry with the friends in her life because her New Year's Eve party the previous night was where she found out that her boyfriend has been cheating on her, and everyone knew. This is the next scene. Bang, bang! The sound of forceful knocking filled the house while a familiar female voice shouted from the front door. "We know you're in there. Open up." Cassidy jumped and dropped the bottle she'd just picked up. "What's happening?" Marinus looked around the room. The golden hue of his tanned skin had returned, along with the shine in his eyes. "Just some former friends calling. I'll get rid of them." Cassidy ignored the fallen bottle and stomped to her front door. Pulling it open, she growled, "What?" at 2 of the partygoers from last night. "We wanted to explain." Paul stood tall in his gray plaid peacoat with his hair perfectly styled into a swoosh at the top and shaved on the sides. "He means apologize," amended Emma, her former new best friend. "So work won't be weird tomorrow." They each wore striped scarves and gloves. Their noses and cheeks held the rosy pink of winter air, and Cassidy was again aware of how cold she should be. She stared each of them in the eye until they fell silent. "You want me to forgive you for helping my asshole ex cheat on me?" She raised an eyebrow in disbelief. "Forget it. Go away." "You knew how he was before you started seeing each other," Paul said, as if that somehow made everything better. "Yeah, you knew," Emma chimed in. "What were we supposed to do?" A fury Cassidy hadn't felt since she was a child urged her to break every plate and figurine she owned over these people's heads. She clenched her hands into fists so hard her knuckles popped. "You introduced us," she hissed through clenched teeth. "I was new to that part of the lab, and you practically threw me at him." "You were so lonely. You walked around with these big puppy dog eyes. We just wanted to make you feel better," Emma practically whined. "And you liked him." Paul crossed his arms. "No," Cassidy said. "I fell for his act because I trusted him and both of you." She sensed Marinus stirring and moved to close the door. "I have to go." "Wait, are we cool?" Emma pushed the door open wider. "Seriously?" Cassidy said with a scathing tone she hadn't used since she was a teenager. "Are these the ones who led you to me?" Marinus stepped beside her and seemed to fill the doorway with his lithe, fully exposed body. "Guess I should have mentioned the shorts," Cassidy thought. Or not, she amended after seeing the shock on the faces of the coworkers who didn't care enough to tell her the guy they set her up with was a cheating bastard. She couldn't stop the grin that pulled her mouth upward. When no one responded, Marinus said, "I think it's time for you to leave." He stepped back, giving Cassidy the space she needed to close and bolt the door. "I'm famished. Do you have any more fish?" Marinus asked. Laughter erupted from Cassidy. He waited patiently for her response. "I'll have to defrost it," she said when she could speak. "And I found you some shorts." A mischievous smile lit Marinus's face. "I'm not a fan of board shorts," he said and followed her into the kitchen. So that's one of my favorite scenes from Borrowed Skin, Borrowed Year in When Magic Calls, because the main character, Cassidy, is finally standing up for herself and deciding who she is and is not going to allow in her life. And her friends get to be shocked by the sight of a naked man in her doorway, so who doesn't think that's fun? And that's why I worked so hard to keep this scene in my book. Next, I want to share an editor and author's thoughts on reading out loud. I'm not as in practice when it comes to reading as I normally am because I don't have that many opportunities to do it right now. But it is important that you read your stories ahead of time if you are going to do a reading. Often, book release parties, signings, conferences, places like that have opportunities for you to read a bit from your book. However, it does not go so well if you don't read ahead of time. You might forget what you wrote, you might get nervous, and that practice will help you with that. Also, you want to make sure you can read at a pace that's not too fast or too slow. If you read too fast, people can't understand what you're saying. If you read too slow, it can be a little painful to listen to. One of my writers' groups that I used to attend would have us read once a month, a 3 to 5 minute section from whatever we were working on at the time. This allowed us to get to know each other's writing and gave everyone practice reading aloud to a group. It's not as easy as it might sound, so I recommend practicing yourself. I read this section a couple of times out loud before I read it on this video so I could do it well the first time. Thank you for helping me celebrate the 1-year anniversary of When Magic Calls, a collection of modern fairy tales. Just because it's been a year doesn't mean I'm not excited about my book anymore, and it doesn't mean I'm not still thrilled when good things happen. So I'm still watching for those nice, good reviews, I'm still working on my next project, and I'm still happy I published when I did. Hopefully, this video will inspire you to either hit that publish button or to get working on your manuscript. So, what do you have to celebrate with your book right now? Post it in the comments below and we can celebrate together. And for more tips on celebrating your writing as well as how to get your book written, subscribe to Ignited Ink Writing, a channel dedicated to helping authors like you transform your writing so it lingers with your readers, because writing that lingers gets remembered and recommended to others. I'm Caitlin Burvey, editor and author. To find out more about me, go to www.ignitedinkwriting.com. That is also where you will find the timeline of a book, which will help you figure out where you are in the publishing process and how to get to your 1-year anniversary. And if you want to learn more about my book, When Magic Calls, a collection of modern fairy tales, you can find that information at my author website, caitlinburvey.com. It's also available most places books are sold. And now it's your turn to finish writing your book, get it published, and celebrate your anniversaries to ignite your ink.